So I hope you were able to get the database and all that stuff done prior to watching this video, because you would have all of the information anyway from previous lectures and so forth. But nonetheless, of course, we're going to go through the whole process here just for completion. Now that we have our user interface pretty much done, let's see, let's go back and get it. We have it here. We changed the quantities items here to actually show numbers keyboards, which is helpful for the user. And if you can click outside and then it goes away. So very cool. So now let's go ahead and wire this save button here, because this save button at this point is not doing anything. So back to our main activity here. I'm going to say we have our button. Let's see. Did we? Yes, we have a save button. And I am going to go ahead and set it up here. I'm going to say button or save button, find by ID, or that ID, save button as such. And I'm going to say save button dot set on click listener, like that. And because we just have one at this point, I'm going to just pass in our view and click listener interface there. And here is where we're going to call save item, like that. Okay, we haven't created save item. Let's go ahead and create this method. There we go. We have save item. Now the save item here, I'm going to just put a to do. Our to do is going to be save each baby item to DB. Okay. And once the item is saved, we are going to move to next screen, which is going to be our details screen, like that. Okay. Now to get going here, we need to create a few classes, as you very well know. We're going to start with a model class. So a model class is going to model off our data point. In this case, one baby item or one item to be saved. Okay. So inside of model here, I'm going to right click. I'm going to create a Java class. Let's call this item. That's totally fine. And this item here, I'm going to have a few things or few instance variables. So the first one is going to be a string. I'm going to call this item name, and then private string, call this item color. Okay, private int. This is going to be quantity. Say item quantity, private int item size, like that. And also I'm going to say private string. I'm going to call this date item added, like that. Okay. And last but not least, in fact, I'm going to put at the top here, I'm going to say private int ID. So each item is going to have an ID. So this ID will allow us to actually track down each item as we add them into our database. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a few constructors here. In fact, I'm going to create one that adds everything, like that. And I'm going to create another constructor that is less crazy, pretty much an empty one. Okay, and let's see here. I'm going to also add a new one that will not include the ID, because we may not need that. So we can add as many as we want. But most importantly, we're going to also create a few getters and setters here. I'm going to just go ahead and do all of them. Very good. So we have our item.java class there, our model class. So next, what I did actually is I added this util constants here. So it's the same thing we had before. So it's just constants that we put together in one class here, which we will be able to then access with the DB version, the DB name, table name, and all of the table columns that we're going to be using inside of our database handler. In fact, while we're here, we're going to go to our data. In this case here, I can come down here and say Java class, call this database handler. Okay, so there's a class there. I'm going to go ahead and say okay. So now our database handler here, what are we going to do? Very similar to what we had before. So I won't bore you with the details here. I'm going to breeze through everything that we're supposed to do here real quick. So this will have to extend SQLite opener. Right? We've seen that before. We're going to implement the methods. There we go. And while we're here, we're also going to create a constructor, which at this point, I'm going to just pick one, but we're going to get rid of all of this because we won't really need any of them. In fact, actually, the only thing we really need here is going to be the context. So I'm going to get rid of all of this other junk. It's quite a lot. Okay, there we go. There it is. And in this case here, context has been passed. And for the name, I'm just going to go ahead and say constants dot and get the DB name. For factory, I'm going to pass null because we don't need that. And for the version, I'm going to do the same, constants dot version or DB version, like that. Very good. So our handler constructor here is pretty much set. But before we even go further, let me make sure that we also pass the context. So in this case here, I'm going to say this dot context, which we haven't created, is going to be equal to the context that we are passing here. So I'm going to go ahead and create this context as a field there. Okay, very good. So we have it there. We have our own create method override, which we're going to create our database. And of course, at the bottom here, this is where we're going to have all of our CRUD operations, which we're going to get to them in a second. So on create here is where I'm going to go ahead and create the actual table. So I'm not going to bore you by the magic of edit. The next time you see me or you hear me, you're going to see all the code here. And voila, here we have created our SQL create baby table. So we're creating using our table name that we instantiate or create in our constants here. Make sure you make this look better and also make it so that it actually makes sense. So we have DB name there, table name, make sure that everything is good. And then let's see, we have the item. So actually we have the key ID. We're passing integer, primary key. This is probably one key difference here. Not just, if you put just integer, it will keep incrementing everything, of course, make it primary key, but it's important to also make sure that you tell the system that you want this to be a primary key as such. So integer, primary key, that's our key ID, right? And then we have the integer for our baby item because we want to get integers added there. We have text for our color. We have quantity. This should be integer as well. I'm going to say integer like this. And size is going to be integer, and key date name is going to be long because the dates are going to be taken as the timestamp, the system timestamp on Android, and then converted later into some sort of a date that we can actually see. Okay, and of course, and then we say db.execute and create baby table. All right, there we go. So on create now, we are able to create a table. And here on SQL data upgrade here, I'm going to say db. I should say db.execute SQL. I'm going to say drop table if exists. And of course, I'm going to pass the table name. Oops, that should be outside. Say constants dot table name like that. Okay, very good. And then of course I'm gonna go ahead and say on create and pass db. So it drops the table and goes ahead and create a new table if need be, because here we're going to be upgrading. Okay, very good. So that's pretty much it in terms of the creation of our database and then the creation of table and so forth. And of course, at the bottom here, like I said before, this is where we're going to put all of the code that will allow us to do the creation, reading, updating, and deleting items. In fact, because you already know by now how to do this, how about go ahead and actually try to do this yourself? At least go ahead, create a method that will allow you to add one item to the database. You can do that. I'll see you next.